South. And this was not a, this was like a city, like meeting.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have 7 o'clock, and we'll call this meeting of January the 3rd to order. The first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice Mayor Patty Abel, please.
Let us pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First thing I want to do is welcome Mr. Travis Talent as our clerk. Welcome to the board. Sitting up here at the horseshoe with the rest of us. So glad to have you. All right, I have the next item of business is adoption of the January the 3rd town board agenda. Madam Manager, I think you have an additional item to add.
Yes, Mr. Reader, Town Board, I would request the board to add a tax release. This came in at the last minute on Friday when your agenda had already been sent out. But if we could add just a tax release, and you have that information in front of each of you. And if we could add that, it would be under new business, item G.
Okay. Anybody else have any changes, additions they want to make to the agenda before? If not, I'll call for a vote to adopt the agenda as presented with the change.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Okay, and now the approval of the December the 5th, 2016 Town Board minutes. Any discussion on the minutes, any changes you want to make? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor? Okay. I have no one signed up for the public session. Did anyone want to have anything to say during the public session? Okay, sir. All right, new business. A presentation on streetscape proposal. Mike Norris with McGill Associates, going to present it. This is for information only. We won't be taking a vote on it. Mike, welcome. Come on up.
Good evening and Happy New Year. I'm Mike Norris with McGill Associates. I've got a handout of our presentation that we're going to be going over. So I get this presentation open. I'm the Director of Land Planning and Recreation with the company. And you have that on your screen? Yes. Okay, good. I want to talk a little bit about our company and more about your project, though. Just to give you a brief background, you're familiar with McGill Associates, but our program of services, I handle most of our downtown projects as it relates to master planning, along with the streetscape design. We've done a lot of projects over the years. We're going to talk about some of these, but a lot of our projects that we work on start from the idea of the vision and carry through the implementation of acquiring funding, a lot of times through DOT, a lot of times through other resources. But we're involved from the inception through the ribbon cutting. A few of our downtown projects over the recent years, a lot in Western North Carolina, a lot of them maybe you've seen. Again, with whether it's master plan or whether it's streetscape being implemented. Again, over 30 downtown projects in the past 15 years. So we understand what it takes to get a project from the design through the completion. A few in Western North Carolina, a lot of projects. Blown Rock reminds me of a situation where you're talking about trying to have more parking. Parking's always a commodity in our downtowns. There's never enough, and that's a good problem to have because we have a lot of need there. But what I want to share with you, some of our thoughts and ideas. We're not going to cover everything in this presentation, but I want to go over some of the ideas of what we feel would be critical and essential to the success of really three things here: evaluating options and ideas for additional parking, developing recommendations for pedestrian and vehicular safety because they go together. And enhancing the recommendations for enhancement of our streetscape. a lot of these relate to each other, and I'll describe how that is. I know you've evaluated parking for a while. You've had some studies prepared. We're going to talk about some of that, and as well as these other two elements. In our existing conditions, we have a lot of active storage rooms, and that's great. We have a lot of active businesses that generates vehicular and pedestrian traffic. We have a fair amount of traffic running through downtown. We have the paired two one-way sections going through town, which is designed to pull traffic through in and out of downtown efficiently, which we do a good job of that. The majority of our parking, on-street parking, is angled parking, and it's 30-degree parking, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment. And then we'll talk about pedestrian crossings, where we have mid-block crossings or at crossings. We want to, again, avoid that pedestrian crash or opportunity for that. We'll talk about some mechanisms and some measures to help prevent that as well. Our downtown, you can see that on the screen. Our downtown width for that face-to-face, when I say that's a face-to curve-to-face curve, is approximately 47 feet. It may vary in some areas, but in generalities, that's what we want to use as this guide. You can see the two travel lanes through there and the angled parking. I mentioned 30-degree versus other parking. There's 3 or 4 primarily parking for parking lots, what we use for description of that. But the 30-degree angle parking, you can see that top diagram versus a 45-degree angle parking. The main differences between those two, other than their angles, but the 30-degree parking is not quite as deep into the travel lane. It's approximately 18 feet deep in a traditional, if you were laying this out. But it also, you can see where the angle is more acute, and it's a longer stall width along the street versus a 45-degree angle, which is less than that. However, it goes deeper into our travel lanes. So we're looking at roughly 21 feet. It's approximate, but if you look on the right where we're talking about the alternatives, and so if you're measuring along the street width, you can fit more parking spaces with a 45-degree parking angle versus a 30-degree. That's the main point of this. However, with a 45-degree angle, we're not able to accommodate that on both sides of the street. So we get more parking, however, we can't do it on both sides. So there's an aspect of that we have to evaluate. What we've got is efficient with both sides being angled, but if we can only pick up more parking on one side, what can we do? So the other option, of course, if we want to look at a 45-degree angle is parallel parking. Now, I know there's probably some resistance to that, and I can understand because we're used to angle parking there, and we feel like that's more efficient, and I understand that. We do a lot with that. However, I just want to evaluate this is parallel parking. If you evaluate 4.6 spaces per 100, it's not much less than a 30-degree angle parking. So, whereas the 45-degree angle parking, there's quite a bit more, 2 spaces per 100 where you're picking that up. So, what I want to do is evaluate this scenario as an option. The big one, of course, is, well, which side do you put angle on, which side do you put parallel on? And let's talk about that. One of the main mechanisms of what we're proposing here is considering, I love downtown framing because it's kind of like the front porch of your downtown. You've got the elevated sidewalk on a lot of your sections of downtown. Elevates that up, and that's unique. It's a different setting than a lot of our downtowns. But with parallel parking, it may be introducing some difficulty if you added angled parking on the opposite side, on the left side, putting parallel next to those steps, opening doors, getting in and out, may be pretty tricky. Maybe the reason why you want to consider, the primary reason why you would want to consider parallel on the opposite side, left side, having angled degree 45-degree parking on the right side. Excuse me. So, as you can see on the screen, having 8-degree parking on the right is 45 degrees. And then parallel on the left side, what happens there? And there are some areas where you can potentially pick up parking that you're currently not utilizing. For instance, there's one section of close to the intersection of Field Street where we have a hydrant. If parking's a real big need, and we've done this in other cases where we move the hydrant closer to the intersection in order to pick up that parking spaces, or those parking spaces that currently can't be used now due to the hydrant. Again, parallel on the left side, continuing on, this is just a diagram of that particular area, where this photo is taken from. But that section of red currently isn't utilized right now for parking. If we relocate a hydrant, then that opens that up for a few additional spaces. Again, parallel on the left side. Actually, as you get closer to the intersection, there are parallel spaces on that side. Looking at the section between Macon and Phillips. Again, there's a hydrant located on the right side there, close to the county facility. Again, relocating that hydrant adds opportunity for picking up additional spaces. Parallel on the left side, actually, and there's some things you would want to address regardless of parking, but as you get further on the left side up to where there's an accessible parking space there, and I believe the traffic aisle is right there where that tree is. So that's something you want to address in the near future. We talked a little bit about safety and reducing pedestrian crashes, and having a good mechanism and a good technique for reducing that is through bulb outs and curb extensions. Right here at this particular section of Main Street, you have cars backing out into the mid-block crossing. Now, a lot of times it's hard for the motorists to see directly behind them and where that is. So one technique we've done, this is actually downtown West Jefferson, where we had a pedestrian crossing, we actually created this sense of public space improvement, where they have a shortened pedestrian crossing there from what they had before. It's a very similar situation, but we also created this outdoor plaza. I understand that you want to pick up parking. This might eliminate it, but it also introduces a public space. That might be something on the opposite side of the street that you currently don't have. This space gets used a lot for primarily for just folks that want to hang out or play music. So there's that public space that we all enjoy going to. So this is an opportunity here where you're providing better public safety and pedestrian crossings, but also creating public space opportunities. Another shot of West Jefferson and curb extensions. You're probably familiar with that term, but again, this is another technique where you shorten the pedestrian crossing distance. You can see what it looks like before at the bottom of the photo, and then with the curb extensions, not only does it create that refuge aisle and shorten that pedestrian crossing distance, but also provides opportunities for enhancement. Street trees, brick pavers, things that accentuate and enhance our downtown and make them more attractive. Just another example of enhancement, and this is where you can pick up parking, provide pedestrian safety, as well as enhancement. And that's what I mean by all three elements fitting together to create a good downtown and improving our downtowns. Sanford, this project was just completed, but again, just another example of how you can use photo visualization techniques to describe the improvements. A lot of times sometimes a 2D drawing isn't enough, but we can provide these 3D elements, which is included in our scope of how these proposed improvements might look. Here's another example of some curb extensions, and if those weren't there, how would that look, and how that softens the streetscape and creates a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere. One of the techniques that I would encourage you to consider is engaging the community. And having buy-in from the public is really important. more and more communities want to have feedback from the public, making sure that we reach out to them, get input, and what are their needs and desires, as well as what are some of the issues that we may have that we may not understand why they may not come to downtown. Maybe we need more wayfinding for parking. Maybe that's an element to consider. Maybe there's opportunities for outdoor dining. There's a number of things that bringing in the public can help us gauge the pulse of the community. One of these techniques is a charrette. We do this a lot where we have an all-day event. It can be in conjunction with another event, but it allows the community to come in at a full day to give their inputs and ideas. We work a lot with DOT on their projects. Again, a lot of these projects are funded through DOT, so this was actually prepared with Secretary of DOT a couple of years ago, but again, this is part of the Complete Streets design, finding a way to soften the main primary thoroughfares. More importantly, though, this is a graphic communication tool. And this is something we do often to show existing conditions and what it could look like. Again, here's another example of a heavy traffic congestion, how we can implement a roundabout. Again, it provides that communication tool there. So enhancement opportunities, again, parking enhancements, location. A lot of what we find in downtown planning is making sure that we know where other alternatives for parking are. If I'm a visitor to downtown, I've never been here before, Main Street's loaded with parking. Where can I go from there? A lot of times signage, I know you have signage where you're parking, but is it placed appropriately? Do we need to add more in other places? That's something we would also evaluate. Because there's never going to be enough parking on Main Street. Safe, attractive sidewalks are important. Again, when I go from my park, if I park in a remote parking area, do I have an attractive, safe method for coming from that parking lot to Main Street? And again, landscaping, a lot of these things can be implemented over time, but they need to be planned out in this process. So again, I'm telling a little bit about what we do. Some of the things that we do, we've got a lot of experience working on award-winning projects from the mountains of North Carolina to the coast. So we understand a lot of the different aspects of the communities have gone through, worked a lot with DOT and understand the different elements of what they're looking for as well. But again, I feel like we bring the vision, a creative vision, and can translate that to reality. So with that, is there any questions you might have?
Hey, any questions for the board?
You referred to one of the former studies. Have you looked at all of the different things that have been, different studies?
I reviewed your parking master plan. I reviewed that primarily. We were in the process of a pedestrian plan. I don't know if that's been completed or not, but I couldn't locate that. That was one of the other things I was looking for, but just couldn't find it. But yeah, I did evaluate that parking management plan.
Was any evaluation done much other than just Main Street?
That was primarily what we had talked about, Main Street. We didn't give a lot of attention to some of the other thoroughfares. Of course, that could be taken into consideration. I think one thing that's important in downtowns are rhythm and continuity. So if you're thinking about downtown, One Avenue, won't be long before some of the other business owners say, how about my street? So it's important to consider some of the other avenues.
One comment you made, Mike, is that there never is enough parking on Main Street. Have y'all looked into any kind of feasibility on this? I think parking is the thing that's basically driving our issue. A parking deck. I know Mr. Collins has brought that up before.
Yes,
there might be.
And that's what happened in Blue Rock. We picked up there's only so much we can do on one avenue. It's pretty easy it doesn't take a whole lot of time to figure out this is the maximum amount of parking spaces we can get. From that, then we go say, okay, we still need more. And that's where you evaluate parking decks. We're working with other communities to apply for grants for additional funding to purchase property. And so it's an ongoing initiative for a lot of communities that still are trying to find not necessarily huge parking lots, but diversity of parking lots and location is also important. They need to be situated in different areas of downtown to make it convenient for different customers.
One other question I have. What is the probability of monies coming from Raleigh and Washington? What's happened to some of the CDBG grants? Is there any hope on the horizon?
Well, we evaluate a lot of different avenues, and Freddie Harrell with me here, he's also engaged with different funding sources, whether it be CDBG. A lot of communities, we work with the town of Fletcher, and we're able to leverage monies through DOT from a master plan effort that was actually funded with DOT in leveraging dollars for their streetscape improvements. That was done through STDPA funds through DOT. So there is a process to go through with that avenue of getting on your local municipal plan, your MPO or RPO, and getting that on the list, if you will, for those improvements. Yes, ma'am.
Right?
We've had a lot of discussion over the years about one-way, two-way traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you would ever look at?
We haven't proposed as part of the scope. However, it can definitely be looked at. We've done a number of projects where where we converted one-way to two-way. Some of the projects I just showed you there, North Wilkesboro is one of the more recent cases where we converted, not only have we converted from one-way, very similar situation here, one-way to two-way, but in some areas where we've taken down signals to four-way stops, to all-way stops, and that's something, I know you have a lot of investment in your signals, and you may want to keep that, but we have looked at that. If you're changing from one-way to two-way, that signal changes also, because right now it's currently on that one pair, but that's something you can evaluate.
How did that work out for that?
Oh, it's been great. They've had a lot of great success in that. At first, they were a little resistant because it's
Used to.
yeah, it's used to it, but could it be two-way? Well, I showed you a photograph they were taken about probably 60 years ago. It was two-way then, so that's why I put that, because sometimes we're resistant to change, but a lot of, I think they found that they got more eyes on downtown from a different direction by doing that. By having the all-way stop, taking out the signal to slow traffic down. West Jefferson, again, that's an example where we added an all-way stop, and they've had a lot of success with that.
Any questions from the board?
I have one question.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
Those couple of towns that you gave examples were they DOT maintained or town maintained?
All of them are DOT, all those. In fact, I'm not sure if there's any downtown I showed you that wasn't DOT street.
Some time ago, I explored the possibility we did of spraying out the street with tar application, with brightening it up and stuff, and then we were told DOT doesn't allow that because, I guess, of snow and slickness or whatever. Is that?
Are you talking about stamped asphalt?
I'm talking about just the spray tar that comes and it freshens everything up, makes it look new for a good while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's stamped, but we were told, I think, from Raleigh that because of it being a DOT-controlled road, you couldn't put an application like that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that being done either. I know stamped asphalt, particularly crosswalks, can be done, but I'm not familiar with anyone doing you're talking about freshen up.
Yeah.
Most of the time they're freshening up, they're going to do a overlay. So I don't, and usually there's a 5-year outlook as far as when each community is going to be repaving. So a lot of times that's a good time to start thinking about putting in improvements when they're going to be coming up with it.
Any other questions? I think one thing that we're facing out here is you've got 5 counties vying for a very small pot of money.
Yes, sir. We really, yes, sir.
Okay, any further questions? Mike, Freddie, thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Very good presentation. Okay, Budget amendment, finance officer, Mr. Dawson, you're up. Oh, there you are. I'm sorry.
This budget amendment is to transfer funds from water sewer into the water treatment plant upgrade capital project for the contract amendment number 1 that's in your packet in the amount of $28,900.
Any discussion? Call for a motion to adopt as presented. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, the next item is minimum housing code violation at 456 Pauling Avenue. Mr. Sexton, you're up, sir.
Evening board, mayor. For you tonight, I have a minimum housing violation that's been ongoing now back since June. This was brought to my attention after 5 neighboring property owners in the vicinity of this house filed a complaint with the town to kickstart the minimum housing process. You should in your packet see the letters, the violation letters about the house at 456 Pauling Avenue. My original letter with the notice of violation was set for public hearing with the property owner, which I did by phone because he lives in Florida, and then another letter with a determination letter from back in the end of July, determining what state the house was in after our hearing. Now I've got some pictures here of the house. You're going to see these. So as of in June, when it first was brought to my attention, this is what the house looked like. It had a lot of overgrowth and pretty much been vacant for almost 20 years. Nobody really, which is the property owner said he hadn't been to it in about 20 years. So you can see that the neighbors were concerned of having to look at the house, and it's since abandonment over the years. This is the back deck from the road right below it. And you can see the other side of the roof with all the growth around it. So after contacting the property owner, he and giving him my determination, my original determination was that the house was in a deteriorated state and was to request them to clean the brush off around the house and fix where the roof had caved in on the back side of the house and the porch that was in the deteriorated state, because when I first went to the house, that's all I could see because the house was locked up. It was the wind, which legally just can't go into the house anyways. Unless I had an inspection warrant. So up till then, so the property owner was compliant. This is what it looks like now. He cleaned the brush off, hired a contractor, cleaned it off. And then they did that fairly quickly. Then about of the 90-day process they have to clean the place up or to comply with the order, that's when they hired a contractor. He hired a contractor to fix the roof and fix the deck to go in. Well, then at that moment, that's when the contractor found that parts of the floor that I couldn't see, obviously without going in the house, was the main floor had caved in and the floor was missing, and he was going all the way down to the basement or the crawl space. So, in a sense, that turned the house more into a dilapidated state instead of a deteriorated for the value. And the property owners took on themselves, they decided they were just going, from the advice of the construction owner or the construction business, to just tear the house down. They thought it was best interest. So they went on with that process to do that, fix it, and went to the county to get their asbestos permit and their demolition permit. And after doing the asbestos study, they found there was asbestos in the house. And that the cost of the asbestos on top of the house demolition, the price escalated and since turned into where the property owner was then refusing to tear it down. So it still doesn't make it their, since they're going to refuse to tear it down, they're going to refuse to fix the floor, the roof, and so on for a house that's in such rough shape. So in a sense, it's kind of come to a standstill, and it's over the 90-day period now. So that's why I've come to you with tonight. And John's probably got some more to add to it of how to go forward from here.
I do, Mr. Mayor. I think the big picture that I think we would like for the board and the public to understand is we are pursuing resolution on several different minimum housing code problems with dilapidated structures. I would hope everybody would see this and understand that it's not as simple a thing as you might think, looking at the codes in black and white, to just declare this or that and find it at a resolution. Because, you know, our number one goal, and we think it's in everybody's interest, the town and the public, to, number one, seek voluntary resolution if that's at all possible before, and if it can't be voluntarily resolved, then make sure that at all costs we have engaged in a foolproof, bulletproof legal process to make sure that we, our actions are not assailable. Because the last thing we want is to have our attempt to resolve this one situation land a lawsuit for deprivation of somebody's property in your laps. So this is a good example of that, where we have been, I think Justin does a really good job, despite occasionally failure of some folks to understand why this takes so long, to try to get voluntary compliance where it's at all possible. With this particular situation, that we're at a point where I think, and we've been conferring about it as we move along here, that I think a step back and to reapproach this from an involuntary sort of a process is going to be necessary, and to reevaluate whether it's dilapidated or is actually salvageable. So I don't think there's actually any step for the board to take tonight, but just to know that we are diligently following the process, and I'd be happy to answer any question you have about progress on any of those minimum housing matters.
Can an owner just completely abandon the property? Is that possible?
Well, if you mean by abandonment, if you mean that it has been so neglected that the structure has become dilapidated, then it would then fall under the minimum housing code, and we would have to pursue service of this process on them.
I mean, could they just walk away from it? There's no way just to...
Well, so in that situation, and that's the approach that you come to one of two, you have to make one of two choices. Either what's called an in personam remedy, which is we file suit on behalf of the town against the owner, to get an order from the Superior Court that they go fix the property. Or demolish it if it's not salvageable for less than half of the value of the property. Or number two, and we've had some success with those in the past, where we have a readily identifiable owner. It's somebody who's here, it's somebody who can get service. It's not a reified ownership that is fractional of 25 people that don't live here. We've had success in getting that sort of compliance, where we've got orders that order that person to comply. The other choice you have is called the in rem proceeding, that's against the property. We still have to get service, but it makes possible service by publication. We don't have to necessarily identify each and every person. And in some of these more difficult minimum housing matters, we're finding that that's going to be the direction we need to go. It's going to take a little longer, but the end result is that we can have an order against whomever the owners are, with the blessing of the court, to move forward with demolition, where we can show that the minimum housing code adopted under state law has not been met. And at that point, we'd be able to move forward with demolition, and the cost of that would be a lien against the property that's collectible in the manner of a civil debt. And then we'd have that to also proceed.
Would he not be willing to do that now? Turn it over?
It's certainly something we have in other cases discussed. I don't know whether Justin's had that conversation.
I haven't with him, no. I mean, that, with this situation, other places it might not be an option, but this one, that, might be an option.
I mean, would it cost more to tear it down than what the land would be worth after it's torn down to sell, to recoup your?
I know this was also just one, but I know the cost just for the asbestos removal was over $8,000 because it had to be a certified company to do that asbestos removal because it actually found the fiber asbestos in it, so that's what made the price go up. And I don't know if they get other companies to do it cheaper, because that was from them, letting me, their quotes they got. On top of it, the landfill fees and demolition and so on. So, I mean, it could be a $15,000 demolition, potentially, in that range.
The asbestos is 8.
But I would say that is definitely an option we keep in mind. It's if the cost structure can make that work, that's one thing, and then if it's possible to get title, and that's good title, and that's a whole ball of waxes.
Counselor, is this going to require any kind of vote tonight? Okay, so
we
I would like to bring up, if I may, one other thing. It suddenly dawned on me yesterday, in going over the agenda, before Mr. Setzer can do anything, he has to basically get 5 letters of formal complaint. I think that's creating a bottleneck in dealing with some of this. I would like for this board to continue to consider doing away with that 5 formal letters. If I live next door to something like this, and the guy next door is a little on the mean side, my formal letter of complaint could become a matter of public record. I don't think anybody's in a better position to judge if we need to move forward on this than our planning and zoning administrator, which Mr. Setzer is, and he's very knowledgeable in this field. I don't know why we've got this 5 letters of formal complaint. It's not a state requirement.
It actually is one of 2 ways you can get into a minimum housing code enforcement. It's in state law that complaints from 5 citizens can trigger a minimum housing code enforcement, but it's not the only method. The other one being administrative and on the sole motion of your land use administrator. Both of those methods are actually in your ordinance. It's just that if those of you who were on the board at the time may recall that the sentiment of the board was to, as a practice, try to proceed on a complaint-driven kind of basis because we did not want to, it wasn't the goal and we did not want it to be taken as the goal to go, inspecting every home with a fine-tooth comb and deciding whether we like it or not.
Right.
It really was about getting down into the problem properties. But, I think Justin has, when appropriate, taken action without a 5 citizen complaint procedure. It is possible.
I just want the board, Mr. Setzer, to know that we have situations. I went out today and I spent most of the afternoon in some places I hate to admit I've never been in Franklin. We've got literally probably a couple of dozen, maybe 2 or 3 dozen places that are as bad or worse than this one is. And I just think that right now there is a perception that you have to have all these, that these neighbors think that they can't do anything because they have to sign a formal letter. I just would like this board to consider just, let's put that on the back burner. It's there if we need it. But I don't think anybody's in a better position to judge this than standing there and looking at it and it being complaint driven or driven by people that work for the town or the neighbors who can look and see that these places are even dangerous, some of them. Any comments from the board on that?
I will just say, Mr. Mayor, if the consensus of the board is you understand there will be situations where it will be necessary to administratively begin this process, we're already there in terms of what is on the books.
But I think we need to move it to the front burner, though,
I understand.
because right now, we've just got some serious situations, and the media just picked up on this the other day, and incidentally did a really good job. But if you get out and start looking, there's some very worrisome places in Franklin, extremely so. Anybody else from the board? If not, yes, ma'am.
I just say, I agree with you as long as we're very careful about it.
Oh, you have to be. You have to be careful about it.
You don't want
do.
anyone to think that you're persecuting.
No, but when you come in, the house is obviously falling
I
down.
know, I
And
agree.
vermin are living in it.
Yeah. And I think your point that people are sometimes afraid to issue a complaint.
Well, I would
because of
be.
repercussions. So,
I would be.
you know, that's something I hadn't really given that much thought, but I can understand that. So.
I mean, just think about having barking dogs sometimes.
And this isn't the only one we're working on.
No.
I mean, this one, I've actually got 4 other structures right now that are in the process. It's just very time consuming, and then trying to, I had one that I sent a letter to and trying to just find, to get service to them, to get a letter, and they come back and just trying to track these people down and serve them, to even just start the process. It can be very difficult.
I guess what I'm asking for is the feeling of this board to tell Mr. Setzer, proceed with your knowledge and understanding of what's going on without having to worry about 5 others appointed complaints.
That's a little,
Is that the fit? Anybody on the board have an opposition to that?
I do.
Okay. What's your opposition?
Well, I don't want to task Justin with the job and with the duty of running around looking for dilapidated houses. He's got other things on his plate that he needs to do. I do believe that if he runs across something, then he shouldn't be afraid to take action. But I'm not going to instruct him that that's going to be his sole responsibility.
That's not what I was saying.
Well, but I want that 5 left on the books because that's state law. And I don't want it to seem like the next door neighbor is just ticked off at you and file a complaint, and now we've got to act upon it just because you and him don't get along. And that's the perception of having just one person do it. That's the reason we have more than one person in the community that makes the complaint.
Does the public need a little more education about this 5-person? They wouldn't know that.
That's
Right. Sure. And so before we give up the opportunity, we've got the high road if there's the 5 complaints. Otherwise, it can get very close to selective prosecution.
and in the past, I have always preferred to get the 5, because then it's legitimate concern. But if it's some situations where you just never get 5 or none at all, but it's really bad, like some of the ones that we're actively working on, then I'll take action. But
And he does have the latitude
Yeah.
to move forward where it's a
I think
health
the way it's working right now, it's
concern.
working, so it'd be better not to tinker with it.
it's just a slow process.
it is a
There's never a good answer to any of these. If there was, then the owners would have been taken care of. It's always some crazy circumstance every time.
There's no good answer on these things.
No, and I agree with you. My feeling was, I think there is a perception, and maybe it goes with educating the public, that a neighbor may feel like he ain't doing anything because 4 other neighbors won't sign this letter. And that's where I was coming from.
Well, then the easiest way to do that is to educate, and not change the rules, the ground rules. Their sets the press, everybody's sitting back there right now listening, so maybe they can write a nice little article.
It doesn't have to be a neighbor that complains, though. It's really somebody who drives by it every day.
Yeah.
So
Is that true?
we need to make sure
There's
people
no
know that.
geographical restriction on the ones who have the standing to complain?
No, it says citizens. Yeah.
Round up the usual suspects.
Complaint squad?
Okay, all right, so I guess what we're saying here, I'm not sure what I said carried any weight, but anyhow, I want the public to know, if there's no objection from the board, that you do not have to have 5 letters of formal complaint. They just, some of this can be just complaint driven by somebody tipping us off about it, or something of that nature. And then Justin will come back to the board if he finds something that needs board approval to proceed with, as we always do.
I think that's fair to say, Mr. Mayor, and it's fair to say we've already been engaged in that process because, and to keep in mind, there always has to be an option for administrative procedure because sometimes we're talking about a tenant who's the only person who can complain. Because if I'm renting this place and it is deficient, I'm not going to have to go out and get 5 other people to sign on with me. So that's in part why he has to be able to take his own motion. And also just want to remind you all that what we have limited the minimum housing code to is an exclusion of owner-occupied dwellings. So I just, for everybody to remember, this is also not to go around and judge who lives where and whether we think it's sufficient.
Who does have jurisdiction? Does the county health department not have jurisdiction to go in if someone's health or the health of the neighbors could be endangered?
There is very little that they will take action on a health. The definition of a health hazard that they are empowered to take action on, at least as I understand their interpretation of it, is pretty limited. It's more like a wide open sewer pipe or it's not going to be, and that's why there is a place and a need for regulation that says if your dilapidated dwellings causing vermin and mosquitoes and whatever else, then you are causing what we consider to be a health danger for our citizens. That's why we have this regulation to take that action.
And if you're on the education part of it as well, I mean, not all of these issues in the minimum housing are issues like this where you come in and the house so bad we're going to tear a house down. There's a lot of them just one where there is somebody renting a house, they're renting it from the landlord, and then the landlord's not holding up their end of the bargain of being the landlord. And I get calls for those, and I've been to places where people are living with no heat, no running water, and then you get on the landlord, get enforcement on them, and I've been really successful on those to get those resolved. Places where people living with broken windows, when it's 20 degrees outside, that's turns into a major issue. So it's not all, these generally when I come to review, these are like the worst case scenarios. So there's
And they're generally owner occupied.
or
Most of them.
abandoned. A lot of these are abandoned or just the owner occupied. Somebody physically lives there and somebody complains about it. Other than if it's in the city limits and nuisance, there's not much we can do.
And there's one other issue that these places breed, and that's an uptick in your crime rates. I don't know what it is, but broken down property will breed crime too, because it's a total lack of pride. Okay, anybody else got anything while we're on this issue? All right, I don't know where we are, but thank you, Mr. Stetson, we appreciate it. You got your motion orders pretty much there. You got a hard job. All right, you're still up. A rezoning petition for Warrior Street and Georgia Road. Basically, I think what we're going to do is let Mr. Setzer just brief us on that, and then we'll vote to refer it to the planning board.
What we have is application for a rezone from Kenneth owns. On your map, you'll see it's one big parcel at the corner of Maple and Georgia and White Street there. It's actually broke into, I believe, 4 lots, which is not shown on the map. So the petition is a request to rezone that parcel with 4 lots and the others that are highlighted in blue that you'll see. I don't know if you got your maps in color. So it's the ones to the south, the Jewel Roper, and then to the one to the west, the Rizzo, Crumpton, the Bubba and Juju LLC, and the 2 properties that Senator Davis owns, which are currently zoned neighborhood mixed use to MICR.
What is MICR?
MICR is a zoning district on our UDO that we currently have in a couple places. The acronym is for medical, institutional, cultural, residential. So it's, in a sense, still a mixed use district. It just has some minor tweaks from the neighborhood mixed use.
And right now, it's neighborhood mixed use.
It's neighborhood mixed use. And so differences is there's a few differences in some uses, but one of the primary, which was an issue, if you remember on this area before, was neighborhood mixed use strictly does not allow drive-throughs at all, period. Where MICR doesn't strictly not allow drive-throughs, but still doesn't allow drive-throughs for restaurants. So you can have a bank with a drive-through, or a different type of business with a drive-through.
But that's not a restaurant.
But not a restaurant. It also ups the restaurant size. The neighborhood mixed use limits restaurants to only 40 seats. The MICR limits it to 60 seats. So there's a little bit increase in seats. On top of, there's some more entrance in medical and some offices that neighborhood mixed use, since we're in with the medical and the school. There's a little bit more emphasis on that. But there's not a ton of difference. So
I'm a little confused by the map. The owners that are requesting this is just that 5 acres, right?
just the cop, yes.
And the other properties would be included in it. Do those people want to be in, are they asking for it too?
Not at this time, which part of a rezoning, one person can request to have anything rezoned. Since it's a third-party rezoning, the idea was to get past spot zoning. Even though that's 5 acres and there's 4 lots, it still could be thought of as such a small area that it would be a spot zone. So to get, you take in kind of the whole little area to get past the spot zone.
Any further questions?
Something that we need to make sure, if presuming this moves forward to the planning board, is that the applicant keep in mind that there's that strict requirement in state law that if any owners that are not signed on as applicants have to have, they have to have
Actual notice.
Actual notice, because that has tripped up this process.
Yeah, which is the difference, because generally on rezoning, you don't have to just send standard mail notification with this, they'll get in, it'll have to be certified that they got notice of the rezoning. And the hearing, if it gets to a hearing.
Okay, any further discussion on this? Mr. Dean, Councilor, you want to give us a motion?
Simply be a motion to refer to the planning board for consideration.
All right, is there a second? Or is there a motion? I'm sorry. All right, is that a second? Okay, all in favor? Okay, so we'll go to the planning board. All right, discussion of the Bidwell Street traffic pattern. Mr. Setzer, you're back up, sir.
All right, I believe it was in November, the board tasked the planning board to look at the feasibility of and with the turn around Bidwell, the section that's one-way, look at making it two-way again and see if it was, a feasible option, if it was safe to do it, if there was issues. So it was took to the plan board in December, and actually it was took to them in November and discussed it. And the plan board decided that it's the November meeting that they'd like to have a traffic study done to get some idea of what the flow was, so they could actually get an idea of how much traffic is in the area of Bidwell and Harrison Avenue. So after that, talked to DOT, and DOT was kind enough to do a 24-hour traffic study where they put the mayor's done these before on Main Street, where they put the sensors in the street and it calculates speed and traffic counts for a 24-hour period. And they did that on the November the 29th to November the 30th. That was a Thursday into a Friday, from 2 p.m. to 2 p.m. And they did it, they were kind of actually doing it on Town Street, one on Bidwell, and then they did 6 more locations on Harrison Avenue, which you should see. I believe Summer passed those out earlier.
Those are in color.
A map that are in color showing the traffic counts. So you can see the counts. They started with 1 and 2, which was north of Tremont Trail on Harrison Avenue, and 3 and 4 was between Tremont Trail and the Sunset. I requested them to do the counts, have counters there, because I wanted to see the potential flow that cut down Green Street, Tremont Trail area coming into town. And then they did another one, 5 and 6 on Harrison Avenue, past Love Street, kind of heading back towards, actually right around Mr. McCrae's house. And then they also did one on the one-way section of Bidwell, heading north. And you can see on each one of those what the counts were in that 24-hour period. Where Bidwell actually had, in the 24-hour period, had 593 cars traveling north on it. So the plan board had that to look over and decipher, and they also got the sheets that you should have with each location, with the speed and the different ranges and what the counts were. After the December meeting, the plan board, and looking through all this, they voted 4-2 to not recommend changing it back to two-way. They thought it was best to just leave it the way it is. But the traffic study showed that there was some speeding problems on Bidwell, and they wanted the town to look at ways to change the speed, address it with either with law enforcement or traffic calming, different measures to look at that, see what they can do to fix it.
Was there speeding on both sections?
On Bidwell,
On the two-way and the one-way?
didn't do one on the two-way part of Bidwell going down. It's only on the one-way coming north.
Mr. Hutchins, that is a town street,
Yes.
totally.
Yes.
So the traffic calming things that I proposed once before on Main was knocked down by DOT. So we would have leeway to discuss some types of traffic calming on Bidwell Street. Or am I opening a can of worms here?
One thing that Mr. Setzer and Chief Adams and I spoke about that might be something to try is, I know Chief Adams has assured me that the Franklin Police Department is out there looking at speed, writing tickets for speed. And one thing maybe for the board to consider is maybe let's try this approach for maybe 4 to 6 months to try and see what we can do with internal in-house control, since speeding does seem to be an issue out there. And then after a 4 to 6 month period, maybe to come back and reevaluate before we do any type of traffic calming. it may make more sense to at least try, since we have top force, to at least try more patrolling and speed trailers out there before taking it to the next level. But that's just management's thoughts on that.
Remind me, what is the principal issues that changing it would resolve? What are we hoping to gain?
You mean by making the whole thing two lanes?
By reversing the decision as it was
Well,
put.
I think I brought it up because I had just been researching traffic calming methods, and one of the findings and research that I looked at said that two-way traffic is slower than one-way traffic. When you have a one-way street, people just have a straightaway and they let loose. So I was hoping there would be a comparison
Yeah, the
on
study,
the speeds on the
two-way versus the
sections.
one-way.
Brandon made me start thinking about it because he was so concerned about the traffic on that road when he was
So
living there.
it wasn't so much a convenience.
No,
The original conversation was ways to slow people down.
Yeah.
And we were gonna see if that worked there. It is unfortunate that the traffic study didn't compare the speeds of the two-way section versus the one-way.
But Billy, wasn't the principal reason that people were coming in from Harrison Avenue not slow down very much when they headed down Biblical Street?
Oh, yeah.
Going
No,
back.
that was the racetrack.
That was the racetrack, that was.
but one thing that's happened since that was done, since that change was made, is that the Depot Street extension has gone through.
Yeah.
That has taken half the traffic or more off of Harrison Avenue. We don't have nearly the traffic that we used to.
I thought about that, Barbara. I did, but my thought is that the ones who's gonna want to go down Biblical Street is the ones that get down there to Old Ingles or something.
Well, now they're speeding down Harrison Avenue.
I don't know.
Or down Green Street, right? Yeah, or down Green Street.
That's what they did, it shifted from one to the other.
Oh, yeah, that's effective with that.
But you can tell still from these number counts that there's a lot of traffic now going down Tremont and Green Street still on this.
You know, at some point in time,
Aren't Tremont and Green Street even a little more narrow than Bidwell?
I actually went out and did some measurements. The one aerial I gave you shows Bidwell is 18 feet. That was me measuring it just with on the computer. And then I physically went out and measured Bidwell. And Bidwell, I measured it down around Carrick, and it was, with the measuring, it was 18.6. And then up on the one-way section, about halfway up, it was around 18.9, so they're pretty close, the width. And Green Street, I measured it around Anderson Street, and it was right around 18.9. And so but other parts in Green Street, it varies throughout through there.
is there a consensus of the neighborhood, what they want?
I think that's the next step.
I think if we were going to explore it, I'd want to find out what they.
Oh, yeah.
We discussed that.
Every one of them.
We discussed that at planning board.
Mr. Such, what was the downside to making it two-way again?
The board thought that, the planning board thought just making it two-way really wasn't going to slow them down. Dr. Harris, who's the chairman of the planning board, used to live on the one part of Bidwell when it was two-way, and he said he didn't think it was going to slow them down. They were going just as fast then, and he didn't think it would change anything this time. So that kind of weighed them over into thinking that it wouldn't change it.
Well, that's not very scientific.
I gave all, we discussed different traffic calming. We discussed a lot, but
Well, if it's the consensus of the board, I think the consensus we're looking at right now is to try the alternative of enforcement.
That would be a start.
And see, but I think we need to put somewhat of a time element on, so we can get a handle of whether it's working or not. A month or 2 months?
I think 4 to 6 is what the manager suggested. I think I'd rather go with her suggestion.
Oh, I'd like to see it about 2 months myself, because I think you're not going to tell any big difference. If we go 6 months, we're going to get into the situation's just going to be dragging on and on and on. We're talking about a half a year. I'm gonna go with the board, but it was board one.
Why don't we just compromise somewhere around 3 months, and then have Chief Adams come back to us at that time and let us know his thoughts. Successful.
3 months?
Well, successful. Kind of hard to make that decision. That's all.
It's certainly at the will of the board. I was just, from a management standpoint, I was thinking, the more we could look at it, because, it is a slower time right now, give school time to start back up, because, they've been on break when we've been out there. You could certainly compromise and say 3 months, and myself and Chief Adams could get together, and then I could report back to the board his findings. But I would not recommend one less than 3 months.
What's the pleasure of the board? I don't think it requires a vote. Any opposition to going 3 months? Okay, there was opposition to 2 months. So we'll go with 3 months, okay. All right, that takes care of that. All right, the next thing I have is a resolution for approving local water supply plan. It doesn't require my reading of the resolution at all, unless someone's dying to hear me read it. All right, we're gonna pass on that one, yeah. All right, I do need a motion that we adopt it, the resolution.
Move to adopt.
All right, second? Second, okay. All in favor? Ms. Clerk, you getting this down? Okay. All right. Madam Manager, you have a tax release?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Board, what you have before you tonight, we have passed out, it's a tax release in the amount of $105.67, and we're just asking the board tonight to release that partial tax bill amount for $105.67.
Okay. I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? All in favor? All right. I have a legal here, item 7.
Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance that I actually brought originally just in the draft form of the board in November for your review and consideration. And at that time, let me back up and tell you the whole purpose of this was that the ordinances as we had them had the old version of the authority for your police officers to